I'll let you go ahead and turn to 2 Thessalonians chapter 3. This is Labor Day weekend. And if you do a little research on Labor Day, you'll find out that at the end of the 1800s and the first part of the 1900s, the labor movement in the United States is what really generated the Labor Day push. And it was to be a day to where those who worked could have a day off. It was usually celebrated back then with parades and picnics. And the working conditions that they endured at those times was completely different than what we're used to today. To get a day off period was something else. The hours were long and the pay was just bare. I mean, it was pretty scarce. A lot of the employers kept them working cheap because workers were plentiful. You could, if somebody quit or got hurt or left the job, just a minute, they could have somebody that would step in and take its place. It was part of the problems that the unions, whenever they came in, had troubles because they could get scab workers to come in and fill those positions of those who were striking, and it just made it very, very difficult. There was a lot of violence during the times, but they finally, during the late 1800s, got a day set aside, but that didn't really catch on very much until the early 1900s as far as taking a day off. If you go on to look, you'll see that, or what I found anyway, is that Henry Ford was the one who actually started paying a decent wage whenever he started mass producing the Model A's and the Model T's. He was also the one who instituted a 40-hour work week, which was so unusual, and a 5-day work week instead of 6. And you think of what they went through to get to that point. So to get a day off, was quite an accomplishment. And then it would be up to the employers in years to follow to where you not only had a day off, but you might even get it paid. And I'm sure that came many years later. But I was looking in the scriptures for work, the benefits of work, and the scriptural references to work. And this is one that I think I like the best because this is the early church. In the early church, they were under the impression and had it believed in with all their heart that the Lord was coming back any day. And even though a few years had passed, they were still on the outlook that Christ is coming back maybe today, but very soon. Most all of them believed that it was in their lifetime, to the point to where in some of the churches, whenever someone would pass away, they were afraid that, did they miss it? Did the Lord come back and maybe we've missed it, or is this what's going to happen to this person who's passed on? But they were so determined that the Lord was coming back that if you look especially in the book of Acts, you'll see that a lot of people sold all their possessions, donated it, gave it to the church with the intent that I'm not going to need it because the Lord's going to come back, and this is just all to benefit the workings of the church. Now, people back then are probably not any different than people are today. Whenever you look and see how people act and everything, it's not hard to go back in history and find that, yeah, they were that way back then too. But I guess Labor Day weekend is the one man-made holiday that I feel like that I'm entitled to enjoy because I actually work, as you guys all do too. And it's one of those things that it should be recognized. In this passage of Scripture, 2 Thessalonians, I want to just read this and kind of go through it a little bit. Let me get on the right page. Starting with verse 6. Now we command you, brethren, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that you keep aloof from every brother who leads an unruly life and not according to the tradition which you received from us. For you yourselves know how you ought to follow our example, because we did not act in an undisciplined manner among you, nor did we eat anyone's bread without paying for it. But with labor and hardship we kept working night and day, so that we might not be a burden to any of you. Not because we do not have the right to this, but in order to offer ourselves as a model for you, that you might follow our example. For even when we were with you, we used to give you this order: if anyone will not work, neither let him eat. For we hear that some among you are leading an undisciplined life, doing no work at all, but acting like busybodies. Now such persons we command and exhort in the Lord Jesus Christ to work in a quiet fashion and to eat their own bread. But as for you, brethren, do not grow weary in doing good. And if anyone does not obey our instruction in this letter, take special note of that man and do not associate with him, so that he may be put to shame. And yet do not regard him as an enemy, but admonish him as a brother. In the church in Thessalonica, I guess the problem that they were having was that they had somewhat pooled their resources, and so for some, that meant I put in my fair share, I can sit back and take it easy and do nothing. And others were doing all the work and maintaining and taking care of and providing, and the ones who were sitting back and doing nothing, it says they were living an undisciplined life. Don't need that fly. And you stop and think about, what does work provide for you? And I just jotted down a few notes. You know, why do we go to work? Whenever I was a kid, you know, my dad loved to work. I wasn't as keen on it as he was. But I knew it was one of those things, if I was going to stay living in the house, I was going to have to abide by it. On Labor Day, we worked. That's what it says. You work on Labor Day, don't you? I mean, that's just what you do. Wasn't our favorite thing to do. Everybody else is off doing something else. We worked. We had work to do, so we did it. Whenever I got off on my own, why did I work? Simply, work for wages, so we can provide food and shelter for ourselves and our family. But it's a necessity that we all have. And it was the only way that we was going to come up with it. We also, whenever we have wages, we have the ability to share with someone else. Charity. You know, couple of years ago, I was listening to a report, I think it was on ABC News, and they was talking about areas of the country and people of the country that give the most. And so they set up charitable donation boxes in different stores, like in Walmarts and places like that, in different parts of the country, in small towns, not the big cities. And then they also set up charitable donations in the real ritzy places, you know, in the bigger stores. And in every instance, the Walmart shoppers gave more money than the rich people did. I thought that was quite unusual. That the people who had the least, per se, was more generous with it. And these were the people who had probably worked much harder to achieve it. And so whenever we work, we not only have the ability to provide for our needs, but because we know the struggle that it puts us on, it gives us the eye to see someone else who's needing a handout, who's needing a little help, needing a little assistance. And I believe that that's a key thing for, you know, those who work. It also gives us a chance for recreation, so that we can actually have a little money to spend on doing some things that we like to do, which is nothing wrong with that. But the one thing that I think that we don't realize, or maybe I was the only one who didn't, was working creates discipline within your life. You know, whenever you have a job that you have to work, whether it's a 9 to 5, 8 to 5, you know, sun up to sundown, it's one of those types of jobs that it creates discipline in your life. You know you have to be at work on time. You know you have to stay there and keep working. You know you do the things that maybe you don't really enjoy doing, but if you want the benefit at the end of the week, that you do it anyway. Discipline in our lives, just like a kid, is one of those things that you don't really enjoy, but yet whenever you get older, you start appreciating and realizing the good that it does. In this passage of scripture that I read, it talked about, you know, they're living unruly lives. They're undisciplined lives. And they're not working. So if you're not working, what do you do with your day? You know, you don't have any place you have to be. You don't have anything you have to do. You can just kind of float through life. Now, I myself would rather go to bed at night with my legs aching and my back sore from working all day than I would stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning playing video games and sleep until noon the next day. I've got on to kids for years whenever I'd say, well, what's your favorite thing to do? And they answer, sleep. You know, well, I like to sleep too, but then I like to get up and go do something. You know, and kids that I've talked to with that answer don't appreciate me because I say, you know, that just shows that you're boring. And sleep is fine, but to accomplish something, you know, work accomplishes things. It also gives us a chance whenever we work to have a ministry of our own. And you probably never thought about that, and I never really thought too much about it either. But if I'm working, then I have the chance to minister to the people that I'm working with. But I also have a chance to minister to the people I'm working for. And I think that both of those are important. Whenever you're working with someone else, you're relating. And as a Christian, I believe that we should be the best workers on the job. Another survey that I'd heard several years ago, it was on Christian radio, said that Christian employers found out that the Christian workers were some of the poorest workers they had because they took for granted that their employers were Christians, so they didn't work as hard. And that's disgraceful. It really is. But to set the example of being a hard worker, a good worker, a dependable worker, and also having a strong faith. You know, it gives you the chance to minister to them. Working for an employer that may not appreciate you, may abuse you, may take advantage of knowing that, well, I know they'll do it, even though they don't have to, I know they'll do it. That is also a form of ministry. You know, when you stop and think about how many times that we've had an employer that we didn't like and they didn't like us. Or they asked us to do something that we really didn't want to do, but you just kind of had to do it anyway. And then you go back and you think of all the times when Jesus was on this earth and all the people that should have recognized who he was and didn't. Those who accused him of things that they knew and he knew that he was not guilty of, but yet he had to deal with them anyway. And if you look at how he dealt with each one of them he dealt with them with a sense of love. And he dealt with them in a right manner, always. He didn't attack and go evil for evil, but he overcome evil with good. And I believe work gives us that opportunity to be the shining example for others to see. The Bible tells us in here to live a quiet life, to work so that we can provide for ourselves and to live a quiet life. And that is pleasing to God. You know, I think the older I get, the more I like the idea of a quiet life. Without all the noise, without all the stuff going on. Sherry and I was talking that whenever we go on vacation, we live in what some people consider Podunk, USA, where there's no grocery stores, there's no real businesses to speak of, not a whole lot going on. But yet every time we go on vacation, we like to go someplace that's just as remote as where we're at. We went to Bull Shoals, and it was this for our anniversary in June. Went out on guided fishing, had a ball. People were friendly, super friendly. There was nothing going on there. I mean, if you didn't go there with the intention of going there, you would never find the place, because it was not on the way to any place. But just living a quiet life and just kind of keeping to yourself a little bit, but yet at the same time, it refreshes you, it builds you so that whatever you are out in public, that you can have the right demeanor and the right attitude towards others. It wasn't that long ago in our country to where if you was 50 years old or older, you couldn't find a job. Simply because all the employers were looking for 20 and 30-year-olds who they could hire for less money and didn't have to worry about a retirement. That's not the case now. The 20 and 30-year-olds don't want to work. And so they're trying to pull people out of retirement to go back to work. Two reasons. One is because they're willing to work. Two, they know how to work. And three is they're dependable. As a Christian, I believe it is our duty that if we can work, that we should be. Not trying to loaf off of somebody else and let them pay our way. Because in doing so, that gives us the opportunity to help those who cannot work. Now, I'm one of these who believe that if we could take those who could work and put them to work, and all the funds that we spend in a yearly basis on supporting people who are just too lazy to work, think how much help we could be to those who can't work for whatever reason. I don't want to ever be misunderstood that I think everybody should work irregardless. I know there's people who can't, and that's fine. But we've got a world of people around that are just able-bodied but undisciplined. They don't have the desire. I think it's a shame whenever our veterans in our country have to struggle. My little rubber band here around my wrist is for the tunnels to towers. Those who have paid the price. And now then, they're trying to establish them mortgage-free homes and things like that. I believe that. It's a shame that any veteran should ever have to struggle. I think it's a shame that any person with any mental deficiencies or capabilities, should have to struggle. I'm all for helping them. It's just kind of irks me a little bit, I guess, whenever I see people that just have found that they don't have to. We started out with a welfare program in this country to help people. And our problem, I believe, has become that the politicians found out that that's a voting block, that the bigger it gets, the more that they're going to stay in power. And it's a sad thing. I'm not about taking anything away from anybody. But if you want to have some self-pride and have a little self-worth, go accomplish something. Go do something. Be something. I've watched people who had every reason to stay home because of whether they was physically unable or whatever, and they would be the ones that would be out there trying the hardest and paying the most just to have a job. And then whenever you compare that to someone who is so able-bodied but just doesn't have a desire to do anything because they floated through life. And maybe this is a wrong attitude for me. But I believe if I'm able, I should take care of myself. That's just more than anything, the way I was raised. I don't believe that God give us the blessings of life so that we could sit back and just suck them all up. But I believe he blesses us and expects from us to do our part, knowing that we can't do it all. That's where he fits in. To help us, to lead us, to guide us, to provide for us for those areas that we can't do. And I believe that whenever we're doing that I believe it opens our eyes to see those who really, truly have needs. And then be generous enough to reach out and help them. And I believe that, to me, that is a Christian aspect. I'm not one who stops at everybody that I see that's got a cardboard sign. I guess I've watched too many of them prop their sign up while they're over here talking on the cell phone. Something about that just doesn't set right for me. Heard too many stories of people that say they can make more money out there with a cardboard sign than they can going to work. Maybe it's my weakness. But I believe that if we can, we should. And I believe that whenever we do what we can do, it helps to open our eyes to identify those who can't. And then be the one who steps in the gap and fills in. You know, Christ came not to show us what we were supposed to do, and then say, okay, guys, it's all up to you. But he came to show us a right way to live. And realizing that we could not in ourselves justify ourselves, forgive ourselves, or redeem ourselves. You do what you can do, and let me take care of the rest. The price that Christ paid on our behalf was to fill in the gap of what we could not do. Let us see if we can't help others by doing what we can do and opening our eyes as to who really needs some help. And then trying to step in the gap. As Christians, we should be the best workers, I believe. And we should carry our Christianity with us, especially on the job site, to where we can share it with our coworkers, and we can also set the example for our employers. Or if we are the employer, to make sure that we pass our Christian values down to our employees. Now, maybe this is not a typical Labor Day message, and may have been too much on my soapbox instead of God's, but I just believe that we should be doing our part. I remember a few years back, that were just so spiritually minded. They were so full of faith that they just sat back and just wait for God to do everything. And people kept filling in the gaps for them. And the problem I had was the reason they were filling in was because they were the first ones to tell you of all their needs. Well, you know, my car's broke down. I just don't have any way to fix it. But Lord will provide. And if I tell enough people that, somebody's going to feel sorry for me, and they're going to pay for my car or just get me a new one. And it eventually did, until it just finally people started waking up and thinking, you know, they could do a little bit on their own. And so they were taking away from those who could or those who couldn't, to give to the ones who could. I'm the other way around. I'll be glad to help anybody who needs help. But if you can do some of it on your own, I think you need to. Last point. Used to, years ago, people called the church wanting us to pay their electricity bill or this or that. I mean, got calls all the time. And my typical response was, I'd ask them how much they owed. Normal conversation usually went kind of like this. Well, I owe $500 on my electric bill, or whatever bill it is. They're going to shut me off. I said, okay, and how long has this been going on? Well, about 3 months. Okay, how much have you got saved? Well, none. And this is where they got mad at me. I said, well, if you haven't worried about it until now, no time for me to start. I could have paid their bill. But in 3 months, I'd had to pay the next one. And in the process, not helped anybody. But it would have taken away from people who really needed the help instead of those who are just so undisciplined in their life that until they changed their discipline, they were not going to be helpable. As Christians, I believe that work is one of the avenues where we teach ourselves how to discipline ourselves, how to do the things that need to be done when they need to be done and be responsible for it. And so I believe it is a godly principle. This morning, as we're gathered here, I pray that we can be thankful for the jobs that we have, for the jobs that we had, retired from or still working, jobs to come, whatever your category might be. But I also pray that through our employment, through our retirement, whatever it might be, that will also give us eyes to see those who truly need some help. And then be generous enough and willing enough, thankful to God for what He's given us, to reach out and share it with others. As we stand for the hymn of invitation, won't you thank the Lord for what He's done for you? And be generous in opening your eyes to see what else we can do from here. The hymn of invitation is I surrender all.